Hey everyone, this is my top 10 horror films of 2022. This was a solid year for horror fans. Almost every scary movie that came out this year was great. Since there were so many good horror films, I was able to make a top 10 list. Overall, I ranked these films based on their rewatchability and my enjoyment. The scariest film on this list might not be my number one. Some of these might even be funny, but in the end, they're all great horror films. Starting off at the bottom of my list is going to be a controversial one. My number 10 is the Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Much like the 2018 Halloween, it's a sequel that ignores all the sequels in between. Whereas Halloween worked, this one doesn't really work. The whole Sally story easily could have been cut from the film, and I think it was a reshoot where they added it all in last minute. The Netflix Chainsaw Massacre is one of those movies that's so bad it's good. Unlike the other two slasher icons that returned this year, Halloween and Scream, this one I actually found enjoyable. I thought the kills were brutal and awesome, the effects were great, I really liked the setting, for once taking us out of Leatherface's house and putting us in this cool little backlot looking town. I'm not a huge fan of politics in movies, but I do like the whole gun debate that they barely get into. The rest of the films on my list are much better than this one, but I needed something else to round out the top 10 list. And compared to Scream and Halloween, I would rewatch this film again. Number 9 is Marvel's Halloween special, Werewolf by Night. I know, I'm just as shocked as you all are. I wasn't too sure about this one going in. Marvel hasn't made anything good outside of the last Spider-Man movie since Endgame, and that Spider-Man film was mostly Sony anyways. I love that they let the director go in this old school approach, making it look like a classic monster film. The black and white looked awesome, and it was a great way to sneak in more gore and blood. I'm also happy they went practical with the monsters. Both Man-Thing and the werewolf look fantastic. There wasn't too much of the forced humor in there. The couple jokes they had worked for me, and I loved the setting of the maze. Overall, I had a great time with this Halloween special, and I wish it was longer. Hopefully we get to see more of these characters in the future. Also, I can't forget to mention the music, which was composed by the director, which was one of my favorite soundtracks of the year. Next up at number 8 is The Menu. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see this one in theaters, but I watched it on HBO as soon as it was out. All the actors were great in this movie. The setting was really cool. I love the direction of this. It was very tense. It was different than what I expected going in, and I had a good time. Anya Taylor-Joy is always great, and even though it was kinda dumb, you can't help but love the s'mores at the end of the film. Number 7 is Smile. This was another one of those films. Based on the trailers, I really wasn't sure what to expect, but I'm glad I got to see it in theaters. I had a great time. I think this was one of the scariest films of the year. Constant jump scares, which were all well done. You were constantly tense and unsure of what would happen next. I liked all the actors in the film, and I loved the monster effects at the end. Number 6 is Terrifier II. This was one of the best theater-going experiences I had all year. I saw this at like 10:30 on a Monday, and the theater was packed. It was so funny seeing people go from laughing to screaming to wincing to screaming again, over and over. The first Terrifier isn't a great film, but it's got some gnarly effects, and Art the Clown is amazing. And this sequel dialed it up way past 11. I know the story overall wasn't perfect. It was definitely an improvement over the first one. I thought Sienna was great as the final girl. I also liked Art's little friend. I can't wait to see what they do in the next film and finally give us some answers. And even if the story's still wonky, I can never get enough of Art the Clown. Number 5 on my list is Pearl. Mia Goth is so good in this film and X. I can't wait to see what she does next in Infinity Pool this year. I love the setting in both these films. I really love the time period, having it take place during World War I. It's something we don't usually get, especially for a horror film. When people ask me about the movie, I tell them X is like Texas Chainsaw, while Pearl is like Joker. You basically just sit back and watch this lady lose it, who already had a screw loose at the start of the film. A lot of it also takes place in broad daylight, and it's still freaky. Maybe even scarier because such horrible things happen right out in the open. I can't wait to see how they wrap up this trilogy in Maxine, which hopefully comes out this year. Next at number 4 is Barbarian. Next to Smile, I'd say this was the scariest film of the year. This is another film where I wasn't too sure after seeing the advertisements for it, if I would like it or not. But word of mouth spread and everybody loved it, so I'm glad I went to see it in theaters. The first act of this movie, where we're just getting to know these two characters, is so good. I could have just had 90 minutes of those two hanging out. It was so tense for so long until you finally got to let your guard down, just in time for it to remind you that you're in a horror film, and sends you down into those tunnels with that creature. I won't say any more just so I don't spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen the movie yet, but I highly recommend all of these movies. Go see them as soon as you can. My number 3 is X. Now, as I said before with Pearl, Mia Goth is fantastic. The rest of the cast is great in this movie. It's not just scary, but it's really funny and also emotional. Some of the saddest moments I saw in any film this year happened in this movie. I love the setting, I love all the cast, I love the killers. One of my favorite theater moments this year was watching the audience squirm and scream when the gator was following her in the lake. This was another film I'm glad I got to see in theaters because it was so much fun. Number 2 on my list is The Black Phone. Now this film obviously has a special place in my heart because I played the grabber in the Black Phone maze at Halloween Horror Nights last year. But besides that, I had a great time seeing this in theaters. Ethan Hawke was fantastic as the grabber, and all of the kids were great, especially the sister. There wasn't a dull moment in this movie. I liked all the characters, even smaller roles like the dead kids and the cops. I love the direction and the style of the film. This was done by the same guy who did Sinister, which I think is one of the best horror films from the last 20 years. My only complaint about the film would be that it wasn't as scary as Sinister, but after reading the short story by Joe Hill that this is based off of, I understand. I enjoyed the short story, but I think this film was a major improvement, expanding on the characters and the overall story. Plus, who doesn't love the iconic mask designed by Tom Savini? And finally, the number 1 horror film on my list is Nope. Now, I've been a fan of Jordan Peele for years. I love each of his movies and I think they get better every time. So far, this one's my favorite. I can't wait to see what he does next. Going in, I was not expecting to have so much fun with this movie. It wasn't just scary, it was funny, and it had a real sense of adventure. I love the whole second half of the movie where they're just trying to catch this thing, and they're working together doing whatever they can to figure out a way to stop it. I also thought this film had some of the creepiest moments I'd seen this year in a movie. I don't want to spoil too much for anybody, but when you hear that thing flying in the sky and you hear the screams echoing through the hills, just wait till you see what's causing that. I also can't forget to mention the whole Gordy scene of the film. I remember my theater was dead silent, and when that monkey looks at the camera looking at you, everybody was just glued to the screen. I love the setting being out in the open. Even though it's a bare, beige ranch, Peele makes it interesting to look at, and the way they shot the night scenes was great too. In the end, I had a great time with this movie, and all the other films on this list. Like I said before, 2022 was a great year for horror, and if you haven't seen any films on this list, please go see them immediately. They're all fantastic. Well, maybe not Texas Chainsaw, but if you're in the mood for a really bad movie that's funny, there you go. So let me know if you agree, disagree with my list. Tell me your top 10 in the comments. And let me know what horror films you're looking forward to in the future.